By the mid-1990s, British policing faced a new kind of pressure. Motorways were busier, criminals were faster, and forces needed fleets that could keep pace without bankrupting the budget. On paper, the decade offered plenty of contenders: turbocharged saloons, homegrown executive cars, and cost-effective compacts, all wearing the Battenberg livery with pride. But looking capable and being capable were two very different things. Gearboxes failed under strain. Electrics gave up on cold nights. Some cars arrived rushed to market before they were ready. This is the story of 10 police cars that promise more than they delivered, especially the car at number 2, which barely had time to get it right. Number 10. Rover 800 series. The Rover 800 arrived carrying the weight of expectation. It was meant to be Britain's answer to the German executive saloons, and several forces gave it a serious look for traffic and CID work. On paper it made sense: a comfortable cabin, a smooth V6 option, and genuine motorway presence. But the boot told a different story. Compared to the cars it was up against, luggage space was tight, and for a police role that mattered enormously. Equipment, cones, first aid kits, it all had to fit somewhere, and the 800 simply couldn't compete. There was also the absence of a proper V8 flagship, the kind of engine that had defined earlier Rover patrol cars and given them rail motorway authority. Without it, the 800 felt like a car trying to inherit a reputation rather than earn one. Most forces looked elsewhere. The car that came next had a very different problem. This one wasn't about space. Number 9. Vauxhall Cavalier. By the early 90s, the Cavalier was already a familiar face on Britain's roads, and plenty of forces had leaned on it for years as a dependable, mid-range patrol car. It was affordable, easy to maintain, and available in the kind of numbers a stretched police budget needed. But time was catching up with it. The platform underneath was aging, having been carried through more than one facelift, and rivals were moving on with tighter handling and stronger engines. Officers used to faster traffic cars found the Cavalier increasingly outpaced on motorway work, better suited to routine patrol than any kind of pursuit. Vauxhall knew it too. A replacement was already being planned behind the scenes. But what officers didn't yet know was that the car built to succeed it would arrive wearing a new coat over old pressures, and hiding a fault that no amount of badge engineering could disguise. That car sits further down this list, and its story is far worse. Number 8. Rover Metro. The Metro had long been a favorite for lighter duties, and the Rover era update brought a modern K-series engine and a genuinely comfortable ride into what was still, fundamentally, a small city car. For panda work and community patrol, it made sense on paper: nimble, cheap to run, and easy to park in tight streets. The problem was power. The entry-level 1.1-litre unit produced only around 60 brake horsepower, barely adequate for daily traffic, let alone the sudden demands of police work. Officers responding to calls needed acceleration they simply didn't have, and on faster roads the Metro was left behind almost immediately. It was a car built for errands, asked to do a job that needed muscle. Some forces persisted with it purely on cost grounds. Others quietly moved on. And if a small car struggling for pace felt frustrating, the next entry was arguably worse, because this one had the performance everybody wanted and still managed to become a liability. Number 7. Rover Maestro Turbo Diesel. Some forces, chasing better economy on tightening budgets, turned to the turbo diesel Maestro as a workhorse for patrol duties. The appeal was obvious on the balance sheet: fuel consumption in the 50s, an engine that could shrug off high mileage, and a purchase price well below flashier rivals. For a while, it looked like sensible procurement. But policing in the 90s wasn't just about economy. Traffic units were increasingly built around speed, and the Maestro's diesel simply couldn't deliver it. Acceleration was leisurely at best, and against the Cosworths and Senators now filling motorway roles, it was hopelessly outpaced. Officers found themselves driving a car built for endurance, not urgency, at a time when urgency was exactly what the job demanded. It quietly settled into background duties instead. And speaking of urgency, the next car on this list had no shortage of pace. Its problem was something officers only discovered once the engine had been running a while. Number 6. Ford Sierra Sapphire Cosworth. The Sapphire Cosworth looked like the ultimate traffic car, a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, genuine motorway pace, and enough presence to make boy racers think twice. Several forces ran small batches from the early 90s, and crews loved it far more than the Rovers and Vauxhalls alongside it. But there was a catch nobody had planned for. Left idling for long spells, which happens constantly in police work, the catalytic converter would gradually foul and quietly rob the engine of power. A car bought for outright speed was losing performance simply by doing its job. And the deeper problem ran further still. The Cosworth's reputation as a thief's favorite made it a target the moment it left the yard, with insurers eventually treating the model as close to an insurable. A police car that criminals wanted to steal was never a comfortable position for any force. The next entry didn't have a theft problem. It had something worse, a fault exposed on the world stage. Number 5. Rover 100. Some forces used the Rover 100 as a light panda car through the mid-90s, drawn in by its low running costs and sitter-friendly dimensions. It was cheap, familiar, and easy to maintain, exactly what a stretched procurement budget favored for routine patrol duties. Then, in 1997, Euro NCAP ran its very first round of crash tests, and the Rover 100 became the story nobody wanted. It was the only Super Mini in that batch to score just 1 star for occupant protection, its cabin structure collapsing badly in a 40-mile-an-hour offset impact while new arrivals held their shape. For officers routinely working at speed on unpredictable roads, that verdict landed hard. Public confidence evaporated almost overnight, and sales collapsed nationally, let alone within police garages already reconsidering their choices. Forces quietly began retiring the model ahead of schedule, unwilling to defend a car so publicly exposed. And remarkably, it wasn't the only Rover to embarrass itself that year. A much larger, pricier Rover suffered almost exactly the same fate. Number 4. Austin Montego. By the 90s the Montego was aging fast, but its size and load capacity still tempted forces working within limited budgets. Estate versions offered genuine carrying capacity for equipment, and running costs undercut new arrivals comfortably. On cost grounds alone, it made a case for itself. But the Montego carried a reputation problem. It never fully shook off a history of electrical gremlins and build quality complaints from earlier in its life that lingered in the minds of fleet managers. Reliability in daily police service demanded consistency, and the Montego's record made forces nervous about committing to it in serious numbers. Where it was used, it tended toward lighter duties rather than frontline traffic work, quietly parked away from the glamour roles. It represented a car whose reputation had outpaced its actual improvements. Reputation, as the next entry proves, could work the opposite way too. Officers trusted this next car completely, right up until Euro NCAP proved otherwise. Number 3. Rover 600 series. The 600 arrived with Honda engineering underneath and a genuinely composed driving experience, and for a moment it looked like Rover had finally built an executive saloon forces could rally behind. Some traffic divisions took it on, appreciating the refined ride and dependable mechanicals borrowed from its Japanese cousin. But comfort master firmer, tighter ride than its size suggested, along with rear space that felt cramped for a car in its class. Then came 1997, and Euro NCAP's crash testing round delivered another blow to Rover's reputation. The 600 scored poorly, its structure faring little better under impact than its smaller stablemate. For a car pitched at serious money against BMW and Audi, that was a difficult result to defend. Forces treated it as a supplementary vehicle rather than a backbone model, and numbers stayed modest throughout its service life. What comes next was rushed onto the road in a way the 600 never was, and that rush created a fault documented in the trade press itself. Number 2. Vauxhall Vectra. Launched in 1995 to replace the aging Cavalier, the Vectra needed to hit the ground running, and Vauxhall pushed it out fast to meet the schedule. For police fleets chasing efficient, no-nonsense patrol cars, it initially seemed a sound, sensible choice. Then the gearboxes started failing. Hertfordshire Constabulary found all 20 of its Vectras affected by leaking gearbox oil, traced to an assembly fault at the Isuzu factory supplying the units, a fault confirmed and reported in the trade press at the time. The leaking fluid didn't just strand cars, it risked contaminating brakes, a genuinely dangerous fault for any vehicle, let alone one built for emergency response. Vauxhall resolved it under warranty, but the damage to confidence was done. A car rushed to market to hit a launch date had exposed exactly the kind of manufacturing shortcut that policing simply couldn't tolerate. If that felt serious, the car at number 1 caused a very different kind of disappointment. Number 1, Ford Sierra. For years, the Metropolitan Police's area car had been the Rover SD1, a genuine V8 icon, fast, characterful, and adored by the officers who drove it. When it was finally retired, the Sierra arrived to take its place, and the contrast could not have been starker. Officers who'd grown up admiring the SD1's presence found themselves handed something nicknamed the Jelly Mold, a car widely regarded as unexciting behind the wheel. It did the job on paper: practical, efficient, cheap to run, but it never earned the affection its predecessor commanded, and many serving officers openly considered it a downgrade in every sense that mattered to them. It wasn't unreliable, and it wasn't dangerous. It was simply disappointing in the way that matters most to people who live with a decision every shift: the quiet sense that something special had been replaced with something merely adequate. And that made it the perfect car to close this list. 10 cars, 10 very different disappointments: leaking gearboxes, fouled catalysts, cramped boots, underpowered engines, and one very hard act to follow. Together they tell a story about British policing in the 90s, budgets tightening, expectations rising, and manufacturers racing to keep pace with a faster, more demanding job. Some vehicles were let down by rushed engineering. Others simply couldn't match what came before them. Would you have trusted any of these behind the blue lights on a motorway pursuit? Let us know which one surprised you most. If you enjoyed this look back at Britain's policing history, stick around, there's plenty more. Britain Rewind has waiting for you.